moving on to trees now. Let's find a tree that we can work with. Okay, so you want to search for tree, white background. And there's a reason, guys, that I choose white background instead of black background or blue background or whatever it is. You saw when I was doing the color picker on the bush that some of the darker areas of the bush as I was selecting it were actually cut out. There are some that you want that for, and there are some that you don't. For instance, if I had black background on that one, it would be much more difficult to get the cuts that I want versus the cuts I don't want. So you want to find something that has some really high contrast. And trees, in general, you want to find something that's white background. So, I mean, right now I'm not trying to find a specific species of tree. I'm just trying to find something that's free. So let's go to free. Yes, you can search for free. Some of them will show up. Others will not. Is that white background free? Yeah. Okay, cool. So I'm going to copy this. Let's go back into Photoshop. And boom, tree. Cool. This tree is interesting. I mean, it's a good looking tree, right? But it doesn't have a trunk base, right? Like it has the trunk, but it doesn't have the base. So I'm going to actually Photoshop one of those in. It's pretty easy. I'll show you how. But the key is just getting the tree to kind of look right and feel right. So obviously with this one, we want to do the same thing. We're going to get rid of the background. So I'm going to use my color picker and select the white background. Go to select, color range. Yeah, we can turn the fuzziness up. That's fine. And then delete. Okay, so you guys by now, I think you've done this like a bajillion times. So I think you'll be very successful in doing this when I release you to do it later. So anyway, free transform, put the tree where you want it. It's really that simple. But scale of trees is really interesting. You can sometimes try to kind of skew them a little bit, and sometimes it helps, sometimes it doesn't. This one I probably will skew a little bit in the perspective direction. But first, this tree is actually it's kind of well sized. I don't think I need to change it much. So I'm going to skew in the perspective just a little bit. So I tend to pull the right corner up, the right bottom corner up, the right top corner down and out, and then I'll pull the bottom left corner sort of in and up a little bit. I don't know why, it's just what feels a little bit more natural to me. I guess because when you look at, let's look at streetscape photography. There. Something like that. Those trees, they feel like they're in perspective, so it's kind of like the base sort of like shifts out just ever so slightly, and then the two top pieces are kind of pulling out toward the, I don't know, that's just what I feel like. They're pulling out toward the horizon vanishing points a little bit. Just feels more natural to me. It might not to you, so you can find your own method there. But anyway, so everything I do is going to have some transparency. So I'm going to put this down to, say, 65, something like that. But now we need to deal with this, this awkward base. And in fact, this tree is a little bright, too. And the light is coming from the wrong direction. You guys notice that? So I need to flip this thing around, actually. So let me go back to before I skewed it. Let's flip horizontal. That looks a little bit more natural, huh? So I'll pull this sort of up and in, down and in, and this one sort of up and in. There we go. That feels better. Let's go back down to 65. There. That's a little better. It's also still a little bright, so I'm going to darken this thing up. Let's go to Adjustments, Brightness and Contrast. Let's turn contrast up a little, and let's turn brightness down a little. A little bit more like that, I think feels a bit more natural. So don't, stick within just like a couple of points, like 10 to 20 points when you're doing these adjustments is usually enough to get to where you're going, unless you have a really saturated image. Okay, so we need to deal with this base like I said. Generally speaking, the trees, like if you're going to put a tree in there, that's kind of all you have to do. There's not much more you have to do. You might want to go through that color range process on these edges a little bit better, or possibly even just kind of blank out those edges where you need to. Maybe I'll show you that later. But the trunk is going to be pretty easy at this resolution. Let's find tree white background, one that's free. And let's find something with kind of a stump termination that suits our tree. It could be, you know, something like these. It could be, not something like that. Well, I want something that gets a little bit thicker down the bottom. Yeah, let's take this. So, and you guys don't have to do this with me. I just want to find something that kind of thickens a little bit at the bottom. So I'm going to free transform this guy, get it all on screen. Yeah. Well, actually, you know what? I think that's going to be fine. Especially at this resolution, I don't think you're going to see much anyway. So I changed my mind. Anyway, what I want to show you here is what you do with the base. Okay, so even if you have a trunk that sort of like plants itself and you can kind of see the roots going out or something like that, you still want to celebrate that connection a little bit. And it doesn't have to be a lot. In fact, the quickest way I can do that is by taking some of my tall grass and starting to wrap it around the base a little bit. So I need to figure out what layers my tall grass is on, so I'll pick this one. And I could just take a little corner like that. I'm going to free transform it, make it a little bit smaller, maybe even kind of pull the edges out a little bit, something like that. And then the other thing I kind of want to do with this is I want to make that particular grass layer a little bit more opaque, and I want to start to blend out the bottom of the trunk. So this... oh, it's already set to 100? Why is that set to 100? Oh, because I copied it from that. Let's do... oh, let's pull it from one that's not 100. They're all going to be 100, aren't they? Yeah, they're all 100. Darn. All right, I need to go back and get some more grass. Because, so when you start duplicating layers, sometimes they duplicate as 100. I don't know what the setting is that turns it on or off, but anyway, let me just grab some new grass. Ah, no, it's not free. Yeah. Because it's just the image at that point. Or did I even make that transparent? Yeah, maybe I didn't. Maybe that was saturated. Anyway, I want a darker grass. So I'm going to grab this. Copy that.
You said for a lot for all your grass feature, landscape features, you like to make it change the opacity lower, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I think you're right. Let's get rid of some of this top stuff. Alright, so this kind of thing I'm going to like really just stretch it around the base a little bit. I want this to be above the tree layer, so if that's my tree, I'm going to pull this above it, like that. And I need to change the color so that it's a little bit more appropriate. So let's go to hue, saturation, we'll colorize it, pull it into the yellow range a little bit. There you go, something like that. And you know how you can kind of see like a hard edge? Even though it's really, really pixelated, it helps to sort of soften up the edges manually sometimes. So you can do that a bunch of different ways. You can use the smudge tool, you can use the eraser tool, you can use the picker tool, the selection tool with the polygon selection. I generally like to just use a small eraser and just kind of like, you know, pull a little bit of edge out. I'm very, I guess, particular about that. So I'm going to grab my eraser and use a hard, I'll use a soft edge. Pull it down really small. Okay, it's way too big. This is only going to be like 1 or 2 pixels. There we go. 2 will work. So see, I'm just like softening up this edge a little bit. Okay, and then I'm going to soften up the top. Particularly at the trunk. I'm going to get rid of some of the edge darks. So that's enough for me in that location. Right, not a huge thing, but it's something. I mean, if you have a more celebrated trunk, it's going to blend into the grasses that you're working with a little bit more. And you can lean the grasses in, you can lean them out, you can just do a bunch of things. You can put bushes around it. Whatever it is that you think is most appropriate for your design, I think is probably going to be fine. So, any questions on that? All right, so there's one more thing that I'm not a fan of with this that I want to show you real quick. So this tree. It looks fine like around the buildings where everything's kind of in the grayscale, but once it gets in front of a very saturated color, I can see that it's not really sort of clipped properly. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab my picker tool, my polygon picker tool, and on the tree layer, right, that's this one right here, I'm going to pick around this, and I'm going to start to, I guess, well, do I want to use the color selection tool? Yeah, I'll use the color selection tool. So I can go to, let's make sure our colors are set to white. And then I'll go to select, color range. In the selection only. You might have to go really heavy on it. Even heavier than that. Darn. The unfortunate part is it's really pixelated, so it's hard to use the color picker tool very well. I don't know if that'll let me do it. It won't really. Alright, well I'll do it this way instead. I'm going to go to layer. Let's do a layer mask. And I'm going to sort of blend some of it out. So just kind of, whoop, that's too much. Let's soften this up. Far too much. Let's go down to about 50% on the color. It's probably too much. 38, something like that. Okay, so you can still see it, but the color is going to pop a little bit more. You're not going to be distracted by the whiteness of that material. So, I mean, like I said, the key to all of this is subtlety. So I went back and I sort of, I re-blended that back and re-erased the layer ever so slightly, you know, 4 or 5 times before I found the level that I thought was right. So anyway, I guess that's what I've got for foliage and landscape. Outside of that, I mean, you guys can be creative with it. If you need me to show you, I guess, you know, like vines and stuff like that, it's really no different than this. You just need to get the perspective of it to match the wall perspective. You get what I mean? So, no questions? Okay, cool.